fruition, a positive vision, so level up. No drowning in our sorrows. Look like you gon' die today because there is no time borrowed. How do we proceed? How do we proceed? Forward thinking argues that these are not the end of times, but the first glimmerings of new times. The ecological thought must transcend the language of the apocalypse. It's ironic that we can imagine the collapse of the Antarctic ice shelves more readily than we can the collapse of the banking system. Like a virus, the ecological thought infects other systems of thinking and alters them from within, gradually disabling the incompatible ones. I really felt like I was in this microcosm of like really romanticizing how pots were used in the world. I get it, they're in our cupboards, we use them for every meal, but as an individual making, there was a disconnect. And I was like, oh, we can't do that with art, but we can do that with pots and kind of like bridge these gaps with our imagination. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just going here. I had my residency at Will Street, and that is where I really started exploring. I made all my first daydreams, made my first hope stones, really started stretching the wheel thrown forms. So I was still kind of tussling with that. I do like using the wheel still, but more as a tool when it's necessary, when I need it. And that to me more is about like volume and life. When I can get pots that really serve a beautiful purpose that can accent these moments in our life, I do appreciate that and I love that. So it's not that I've like kicked that out of my life completely. I just really try to have it make more sense to me versus just reiterating what I was taught, and really live it and go through my cycles with it. As you cycle through, interests in art practice, we kind of have these intersections and these weird quirks sometimes keep coming up. And I was told that all your flaws, you should learn how to embrace, because your flaws is what set you apart. So a flaw, when we see it as a flaw, it's what instantly makes our work different. So if we actually focus on these natural ways that we want to call flawed, they can be our strengths. That can be this thing that just happens really naturally that we can work through and kind of pull out. So with this body of work, I'm trying to reveal to people these connections. And yeah, I just made the choice, like this is related to that, with kind of how these figures or the daydreams really look, and almost, there's moments of architectural like sculpture that are very similar and kind of like intersect. So just like giving those things value and knowing that like these are prototypes. A lot of them. We think of art as like these final things, but everywhere else in the world we can have prototype 1, 2, 3, and 4. They can even go to market. They can even be altered. Then we get to update that. So it's like, why can't we do that with our work? So it is about allowing intuition in a way that's backed by integrity, but really giving it power, because you can have intuition without integrity, and then it can be trying to get away with murder, it can be all this, but if you really come to it from this way of just like learning material, learning about yourself, connecting with people, I think it's valuable. I think it's super valuable, and that, yeah, I'm trying to like ignite that in all of us with how I set this work up and how I try to like make connections. And it's like, this is a perfect stack right here. So I have Bernard Leach, Hamada, Warren McKenzie, Carl Apple, June Kanenko, Ken Price. Those are all clay workers, for the most part, but like Ken Price, Warren McKenzie, very different. But like you could probably see, if you know either of their works, you could probably see some of that and how I'm bringing it together. Then I have Eminem, and then Bernard Leach, Potter's book. So it really was like trying to harness these natural ways that I like to express, that I notice people gravitate to, and just bring that together to like make one amazing sandwich, that has all of it. And like, you can have all of it without needing like a singular
through line. And through doing that, it's like, I always hate it if like people feel like they don't get something, they're like not in on the joke, or that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to speak in a way where it's like, oh, if you don't get that, you can get it another way. Like if like something I say or like it doesn't connect, it's not to like belittle anybody. It's like, oh, I'm actually going to say it another way, and that one's meant for you. You know, you can just take it or leave it. Like we need to get back to that. Like, you know, discernment. Like when we speak as artists, like we have to receive like everything the artist says, and it's like we have to get it just like that. It's like, oh, it's all a conversation. You know, it's all in flux. And so much of us and you as viewers make the work. So there's so much out of my control already and out of our control as artists that I'm leaning into that. And with hopes of trying to connect with like more people. And so like through those kind of like connections, you know, I think that's where like beauty and diversity really comes from. And then also like from these books, I had like great mentors and teachers that I really hold high. I even got to talk about it earlier with some of the pots in the back. It was mentioned that they had a lot of volume, and that was specifically from a utilitarian potter that I studied with, Stephen Rolfe, out of River Falls, Wisconsin. He really, he instilled so many values in me through pottery and just living with his family that I can bring through sculpture. And just about how we touch material, how we learn through the material, and how we collaborate with clay. Because clay, as soon as we take it out of the bag, water's evaporating out of it, we're in constant exchange, collaboration with the material. So it is about that. And those pots, I just make sure I always kind of breathe life into them at the end, and how I do that is I make sure I touch them from the inside so that they get good posture, as he would say, and they're more full of life. You know, because if we're just beating them up from the outside, they're going to be like the pop can, and they're just not going to be quite as full of life. So, you know, even though I really don't have a sculpture mentor, all my pottery professors and all that experience is in success for me was always having a space and wanting to work in it. That's what's success. If I could build a space that was exciting and I just wanted to keep working, obviously you need means to an end. Obviously you have to have material, you know, it costs the fire kilns. But like I simplified it like that. Like all that other stuff would work itself out if that was my focus. Yeah, and now I have a problem with like keep taking on more teaching jobs, more than I can even handle. So now it's like, oh, I can actually prioritize my practice now because it's starting to get taken over by like these other things, and it's like I'm okay financially now, you know. And so like trying to walk that line. And so I do think teaching is a very important part of my practice, especially if you heard me talk earlier. Some of these works came from my after-school programming, specifically engaging with kids, how to work with a really hard material that takes a lot of investment, but like get kids that might only be here today, how can they leave with something? And how can they learn about the material in that same time? So it's all about sensibility. It's all about as soon as that first bag of clay opens, that's the first teaching lesson. We are now in communication with the clay, that moisture is leaving. So if we leave it there, it'll dry, and then we will be limited with the material. The sooner we act with it and engage with it, we have way more time with it. We can learn about it, we can add water back into it. So it really is like this about collaboration with self-materials and the spaces we find ourselves in. So teaching has like, I don't know, it's crazy because when I went back to school, I knew that if I was going to fit into the world in some way, it would be through teaching, and then I would be paying homage to a teacher that like saved my life with clay. Like I know it sounds cliche, but it's real. She pulled me in, showed me the process of recycling clay. I'm like, you do all this in here? And my locker was right out front of that classroom for 2 years. I had no idea what was beyond that door. I was like, right here? So it taught me, look everywhere. You know, we live in a world where everyone wants to be seen but not see. It's like, we go out to be seen, we gotta go out to see. You know, so I try to like use my time in the classroom to really see people, meet people where they're at, learn from them. It's cool because I have some High Park students in here right now, and it's like, it's cool because it's like we just have to do these things. You know, we just have to, we think about it, we do it for so long. When I was making pots, it's not that I was unhappy, I was selling work. You know, I was selling work along these amazing potters right away. But there was this disconnect. I'm like, they don't want to look at this? Like, look at how cool this is. That's not my goal and my intention. Like, as a teacher, I really think it's important to like inspire and be transparent. And so like, anything I get in life, I want it to be transparent. I want to be able to talk about the flaws. One thing I said earlier too that I think is really poignant to me is like, before I put this out in the world, I critique everything. I'm like the harshest critic. Some days I beat myself up, but I don't even want to look at the studio, and it's like, oh, that's okay. That's like the harsh critic. Like, he might not even see your work ever, you know? And so, okay, go back, you know? But it's like, I just live in that space. And then I'm really grateful for Kimberly allowing me to bring like the as-if stuff in here, because that is actually my LLC, As If Art Pays. And it's funny, that's like the more affordable stuff. And it's like this kind of dialogue of like how, when we define ourselves as makers, entrepreneurs, all this, we instantly find a market, right? And we're aiming, well, what does this offer? What value can we put on it as far as capital goes? Who can we sell it to? Where can we make the most, sorry, I'm losing my words, but where can we get the most return for our investment and that? And I would say I'm kind of doing the opposite with this stuff. I'm trying to be really resourceful, so kind of learning from where the whole stones come from. All of this is like upcycled or discounted like goods. And then I just like screen print on them at home for fun. It's a way that I can kind of advertise, camouflage like, you know, low key put things out into the world. Don't need any huge return, like don't need it to go out, be seen, and like have more people come. No, this is like house music. You gotta know the source to get it. You gotta come to me to get it.
How do we proceed? How do we proceed? Forward thinking argues that these are not the end of times, but the first glimmerings of new times. The ecological thought must transcend the language of the apocalypse. It's ironic that we can imagine the collapse of the Antarctic ice shelves more readily than we can the collapse of the banking system. Like a virus, the ecological thought infects other systems of thinking and alters them from within, gradually disabling the incompatible ones. The infection has only just begun.